Hello, guys, and welcome to today's episode called Basics for Anxiety Navigation. I really love this topic and the wonderful lady I have here for you guys today to speak on this. I am bringing on Robyn Graham today, a special friend, wife, mother of three, host of the Robyn Graham Show, author of You, Me, and Anxiety, and personal brand and business coach. As you guys can see, Robyn does a lot of important and really cool things and uses the power of brand strategy to help women build personal brands and businesses with strong foundations. I am so stoked to feature Robyn's story, tips, and tricks today. So without further ado, welcome Robyn to the podcast.
Thank you, Paris. I am super excited to be here. Every time we have talked before, we click. It's so nice. And I think our journeys have been so similar that it's nice to connect with like-minded people who have had similar experiences and are just working to try to put more good out into the world. So thank you very much for having me.
Of course, exactly. And everything, like you said, I resonate with so much because you guys, a little background before this episode came out, me and Robyn connected almost a year ago or something like that. It's been a while. Yeah. We connected and we had a conversation. And it just felt like I could talk to her forever and hours about these topics, anything related to mental health, mindset, all the things that we're going to hear about today. So she's amazing. And you guys are going to definitely feel that by the end of this episode with her story and everything that we're going to get into. So before we go ahead and dive into that, I would love, if you could talk to me about your personal story with anxiety. I would love to hear about that.
So my anxiety reared its head when I was a young child. I was the oldest for most of my growing up life, it was three of us. And then when I was 11, my mother had my baby sister, and my twin sisters are 2.5 years behind me. So for the most part, it was just the three of us growing up. And I was the oldest. I was pretty shy, an introvert, very intuitive, and curious about life as a whole. But there were so many days I would be ready to go to school and I would just cry. My stomach would hurt just severely and I would just cry. I would sit on the front porch and cry while the people are in the driveway for carpool, and my mom could not get me off of that porch to go into the car to go to school. So my anxiety started very, very young. And as a result of that, and the fact that back then, nobody knew what it was. Anxiety hadn't been studied a lot, and nobody could find physical reasons that my stomach hurt so bad, or, there just was no rhyme or reason to what was happening. And thank God my parents loved me dearly because they, took great care. And I excelled in school. I, did well in sports, athletics. I was in clubs and honor society and all those things. But socially, I was backwards. And it was very hard to build relationships because I was so anxious and I did not trust. And as great as my parents were, there was a lot of dysfunction in our family. My mom was a teen mom. Her mother, my grandmother, was what most likely was bipolar that was never diagnosed. She was definitely, you never knew who you were going to get. Mm-hmm. And there were years and years where she didn't speak to my family, or she would speak to my sisters and I, but not my parents. And it was just, my father had anxiety back then. Of course, they didn't know that's what it was. And he was a tough, masculine guy. And he wasn't going to go to the doctor and say, I'm angry all the time and I explode. But guys just didn't do that, back then. And so, I've lived with it my whole life. And I've watched my parents, I've watched me, I made it through college, but that anxiety was always at the surface, and it prevented me from doing things I wanted to do because it stimulated so much fear in my life. So I did miss out on a lot, and I would latch on to a relationship, whether it was healthy or not healthy, and, hold it tight out of fear of losing it because I thought that's all I had and I wasn't worthy of something else. And so as a result, my boyfriend through college was abusive, and emotionally as well as physically. And I thought that was it. That was just I couldn't leave him because nobody else was going to take me. And, all the things go through your mind and your heart, and it stifles you. And then I had that same level of anxiety with public speaking. And, it was like, my book goes into a lot of detail of all of this, but at the end of the day, all I can say is that it has taken me years of navigating it to overcome it and be able to function at such a high level that I am able to function today.
Wow. And just, I think that so many people just listening to this and hearing everything that you just said is just going to resonate so much. Cause I know that I do, hearing you share, especially at such a young age, when you go back to school, being sitting there and crying and having these experiences at such a young age. And then also when you talk about public speaking, right? That so many people, don't want to do it. They don't like it. And then when we come up with these things with anxiety, I'd love to ask you too, if like looking back on your life now, because I feel like that's what I always think about when you look back on things at certain points in your life, it's more clear. You're like, okay, this makes more sense to me. Like, this is why this happened because of, like you said, the abusive relationship, and having that relationship and clinging to that is something that I also did as well. And I know probably so many people can relate and have people in their lives who are in that position. So looking back now, is there something that you can say like, okay, this is probably, what really caused me to have this anxiety at such a young age? Or are you still kind of exactly unsure if it's a combination of factors, or is there something that really sticks out to you? Like, okay, this is something that really, really, really has contributed to this.
So multifold. So, anxiety does have a genetic component. So
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned my father had it. I know my
Yeah.
grandmother had it. And back then, of course, we had no idea. We didn't know what that was. It wasn't until in the mid 90s when my grandfather passed away that the doctor said to my grandmother, you are crying all the time and you have anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And they diagnosed her with anxiety and put her on medication. Well, at that point, I was in pharmacy school. So I was very interested in psychology, and I did study psychology a lot. And it was one of those things, I'm sitting in the classroom and it's like, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it was like self-diagnosis because I had no idea my whole entire life why I behaved the way I behaved. And it's not that I was weird. I did have friends. I was on student council. I was on homecoming court, but I was different. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like I just rolled into social situations and I functioned highly. And I was very fortunate that my parents were very adamant about, alcohol and drugs. And I was afraid to try any of that because we did drink in high school,
Mm-hmm.
but I had seen alcoholism through an aunt and I knew how terrifying it was. And I never wanted to be out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was able to have a certain level of, I guess, control over the decisions I made and the choices I made for my life and about my life. But what I will say is that until you realize what is happening within you, so if you have physical symptoms, if you're waking up every morning and you're like, I don't want to get out of bed, or your stomach hurts and you can't pinpoint why your stomach hurts, or if you're in certain situations when you notice certain physical symptoms like a headache or dizziness or stomach pain, and it could be, stomach pain, it could be having to go to the bathroom urgently, it could be anything, but noticing what is going on with your body. And as you start to notice these symptoms, start to document when they happen and what has happened around that time that those symptoms are occurring, and start tracking that, because we all have certain triggers that are going to stimulate those physical symptoms. Not everybody's going to have physical symptoms. Sometimes we only have emotional symptoms, but you'll know if all of a sudden something doesn't go your way and now you're furiously angry and you're like, why am I so angry? That is another symptom of anxiety. If you're living with a lot of shame is another symptom of anxiety, because when we're in a state of anxiety, we can't move ourselves forward out of that state. And so we make maybe bad choices. There's shame with being with someone who has hurt you and abused you. You lose your self-worth, and that results in shame. Being angry, fighting with someone, hurting someone else, that results in shame. All of these things compound over time. So the only thing I can say is to make sure that you're observing, you're connected with your mind, body, and soul, and notice what is happening when, and the triggers that have caused whatever that is that's happening within yourself. And then take action over that. I talk in the book, the whole motto is action over anxiety. And the long title of the book is You, Me, and Anxiety, taking action over anxiety to enjoy being you. Because for so many years, I didn't enjoy being myself. And I want young girls to be able to enjoy being themselves, to enjoy the life they have and not feel like they have to be perfect or be something else to be loved, because they don't have to be. No one has to be anything else to be loved. We're all created and with love in mind, with love as a purpose. And so if you can catch those thoughts, those anxious thoughts that you're having, and challenge them, is this legitimate? Like, should I be feeling this way about this scenario? The most important thing you can do is journal about these, because there's such a mind, a trigger, a connection when we write to our brain. And so if you can write these things out and really make note of, okay, this is a thought that I'm having, but the reality is that's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it's not going to happen at the extent I think it's going to happen. And it can be as simple as, going to a dinner party, or if you're a teen, going to a high school party, or going to a dance. Those anxieties will hold us back from going, because fear escalates and escalates and escalates. And so you have to catch those thoughts and then try to challenge them to then rationalize them. And most of the time they're not rational, and you'll discover that very quickly. And you can kind of walk yourself off that ledge of inability to do things, because you realize that they're not so bad. Like, it's really not as bad as your brain is telling you.
That's
and then
so good. Oh my
once you challenge those thoughts, you can change them. And the more you change them, the more you will be able to start living without that anxiety holding you back. And then that becomes a source of control, right? The more you can control your thoughts, the more you're going to be able to control your behaviors and your emotions. And then when you're doing that, you're going to feel more confident. So it's the 5 C's. I call it the 5 C's of navigating anxiety.
Wow. Okay. That is so powerful and so useful, especially that when you bring up tracking and having the awareness and tracking these things, journaling, writing it down, because that really is the first step, right? Is understanding and being aware that this is happening. This is how I'm feeling. This is what happened before. This is what's happening now. And to kind of lay it all out there and say, wow, this is it. This is to have that, because I feel like there's so many people who have moments where, me, myself included, having no awareness of any of this. So that is such great advice and incredible tips. And that was actually one of the things that I was going to ask you too, is the 5 C's for overcoming anxiety. And you just completely laid it out there right there. That was, so beautifully the way you put that and described that, of how people can start, incorporating this into their life when they catch themselves, feeling like you said, going to a dinner party, right? Or, getting up in front of your class and presenting, which I know I always hated and would try to find any excuse I could to not do that. And, just digging deeper into that, like, what's at the root of this, where is this coming from? And just really discover that and learn more about you and how to navigate that, I think is so powerful. And really does kind of help restore power back into you or that person when you're going through that. And I'd love to ask you too, especially with, being a mom and having kids who also experience this, I'd love to ask you, like, what has your experiences with anxiety taught you in terms of helping your child manage their anxiety?
So that's a great question, because it wasn't until we experienced significant levels of anxiety with my oldest son that I actually learned how to navigate my own. I had read books, like I was that mom that would yell and scream because my brain immediately would just go into this cycle of thoughts, anxious thoughts. And it was just, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't break that. And I would just explode.
Mhm.
And I mean, thank God I never ever hurt my children. I just, like
Yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
really, really good mom, but
Yeah.
I was very reactionary.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't until my son was in sixth grade when his symptoms of anxiety really showed. And then it was in his freshman year of high school that he actually basically, I don't want to go into all the details. It's his story to tell, but he basically had a nervous breakdown. I mean, for a lack of a better term. And it was related to, he made the lacrosse team, and the school he was going to, it was a big deal to make this team. But some of the kids he'd played with his whole life had made varsity. And so in his mind, in his
Mhm.
anxious brain, he wasn't good enough. He couldn't do
Mhm.
it. He was failing everything else. Prior to that experience, he had started running. And when a lot of people who have anxiety will have symptoms of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And for him to navigate his anxiety, the stress of school, and he was extremely bright. He is extremely bright. Pushed himself so hard, expectations that we did not place on him, but that he placed on himself. And
Mhm.
I watched him all of those years. And one of the reasons I left my corporate job was because I did not want him to live a life that I had lived with anxiety. And I wanted
Mm.
to be there to support him every step of the way. And so, becoming an entrepreneur allowed me to do that. But my point in telling this is that those symptoms of anxiety can present in so many different ways. And he had started running to offset the anxiety. That's how he was controlling it. And he was running long distances. Well, you can't run long distance and go to school all day and play a sport
Mhm.
and play games and do all these things. And so his brain was telling him he couldn't play lacrosse anymore because he had to run. I mean, by
Mm.
the time he was 17, he ran 2 marathons. That's
Wow.
almost unheard
Wow.
of,
Oh
right?
my gosh. Yeah.
He did go back. He did go back to playing lacrosse. He had a very successful lacrosse career, sophomore, junior, senior year. But what I experienced with him and watching him go through the things that I had gone through, because I too had something related to sports. When I got to high school, I gave up my basketball career. And that sounds funny, but I was all conference. I was very, very good. I was tall. My
I
dad
could
didn't
see
have
it. I could see, yeah.
my dad didn't have boys, so he was a coach, my coach, and he pushed and pushed and pushed, and I was very good and I loved it. But anxiety held me back. I was afraid. I was so afraid I wasn't going to make the team and that I wasn't going to excel, that I couldn't do it. I couldn't go to a bigger
Mhm.
school with other kids and try. Couldn't do it because of
Mhm.
anxiety. And so I was watching my son navigate this and I was like, oh my gosh, it's me all over again. And had I known then, or had my parents known what I knew, we could have navigated those scenarios so much differently. And fortunately, I knew, we got my son into the best psychiatrist, the best psychologist, and we were able to use cognitive behavioral therapy, which those 5 C's that I work with, that's like the root of what cognitive behavioral therapy is. So you have to, as a parent, know that you cannot say get over it. That does
Mhm.
not work. That's the number one thing. Number
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
is just love and support, because they're navigating this and they're struggling internally so deeply and they don't understand what's happening in their own mind and body. So get the help that they need, because as parents, unless you do have, and a lot of times, even if you do have a psychology background, you as a parent are too embedded in the situation. You need to take a step back and get them help from an outside source.
Mhm.
So I am a strong believer in therapy. I think it makes a world of difference for everyone. And if you can't afford it, there are always options with state funded programs or nonprofits where you can get the help that you need. So I guess from the parental perspective, that's what I would say.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love how you talk about therapy, especially at the end, and bring up, what a great tool that's been for you and also for me, and just, so many other people who can talk and attest to that. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about that, what you said, is talking about your experience, right? and then seeing that experience in your son and seeing that, and then really, and I think that's, I feel like that's such a great thing that he has you, because you living through that on your own and having gone through that, seeing that in him, like you said, like knowing what to do to support and be there for him to help him through that is so powerful, because I feel like there's probably so many, kids out there who are experiencing this and feeling like they don't know how to communicate it or express it, or, like, how do I start this conversation with my mom or my dad, like telling them these things. But you recognizing that in him and being able to, see this, like he's running so much more to offset the anxiety, and he's feeling like he's not good enough inside because of the bringing up the thing with the lacrosse and not getting a varsity or a certain level, and then saying, okay, like I'm a failure, and internalizing that and taking that as, I'm a failure as a person, and really internalizing that. You understand that, you recognize that. And I think that's so amazing that you were able to have that and, take those experiences and really help guide him through that, because, there's a lot of people who probably, and don't have that and are, still, really struggling with this to understand it. But I think that's, such a great gift that you were able to have. Cause I feel like, see, even with these things that look so terrible, like struggling with anxiety, I think is a blessing in a weird kind of disguise that you can take and use to help other people, like your son and other people, through your book, your story, and everything that you're doing. And that brings me back to, one question I really want to ask you too, that you've definitely touched on this, but the most powerful lesson I would love to ask you. So the most powerful lesson that you feel that you've learned along the way so far with your experience with anxiety, like has anxiety taught you a powerful lesson? And if it has, what is that one powerful lesson that struggling with anxiety has taught you?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. And you know, before I dive into that answer, I would like to say, and this is part of something that I've learned, is that we have to be our own advocate. And no matter if you're 14 or 32, the reality is, if you know something's not right inside of you, you have to be your own advocate. And no matter what the world is saying around you, just because you have something from a mental health perspective, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, it does not mean you are any less of a person, that you are less worthy of love or acceptance than anybody else. We don't judge cancer patients or heart patients or immunocompromised patients the way we judge mental health patients. So instead of judging and criticizing, get curious. Support people in a way they're going through something. Like if they can't smile or they're having trouble talking to you, something is going on. Be supportive, just be kind, smile at them, share, just a nod of the head or a hello can make a complete difference in the life of somebody who's going through mental health issues and challenges.
Wow.
That's
That, so
that's the
good.
first thing. And then the second thing is that is grace. Just give yourself grace, because
Yes.
none of us are perfect, and every single person on this planet is going through something. And your diagnosis may be something completely different than the next person's, but the reality is no one's perfect. And don't put those expectations on yourself. Give yourself the grace to be who you are and navigate it by taking action.
Wow. I love it. I love it so much. This is so good, especially when you talk about advocating for yourself and being your own advocate. And then also, having that grace for yourself and understanding, regardless of having a diagnosis or not, whether or not you have, been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar, or maybe you never have been to a psychiatrist or therapist or anything like that. But knowing that we all have something that we are struggling with, that not everyone can see, not everyone understands. So having that grace for yourself and also advocating for yourself and feeling like if you can't, there's so many incredible resources that you mentioned, through state funded programs, nonprofits that people can get involved with to really bring that out. And I think is such a good point. And oh my gosh, like this brings me to the last question that I always love asking everyone, because everyone has such a different answer. And it's so beautiful to see, what everyone brings to the table on this. So I would love to ask you, Robyn, okay, right now in this moment in time, what are you currently doing to master your mental?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's multifold, of course. I don't do just one thing, but one thing for sure is mindset work every single day. I journal, and in my journaling practice, there is a gratitude component. So
Mhm.
at night, when I close out my day, I write down at least three things that I am grateful for. And sometimes I am so tired and I am like, "Ugh, what good happened today?" You know what? If I had a sharpened pencil to write with, that's something to be grateful for. And I know that sounds silly, but there is always, always something to be grateful for. And have, the more I dive into my gratitude practice, the more I'm able to navigate my life and my reaction to situations and how I handle just life in general and all those things that come at me on a daily basis. And sometimes, and this is really important with the mindset work, to believe that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. That every
Yes.
experience you have on your journey is giving you the opportunity to grow and develop and learn. And from those experiences, you can then go on and help other people. And so I would say just that mindset component in journaling, those are my, and I mean,
Huge.
of course, that, I do devotions every morning, I meditate, I do my journaling, and,
Yes.
that practice to keep my mind healthy, and then physical exercise as well. Like that,
Oh my
that's what I
gosh.
do. So it's more than one thing, but I lump them together as this is what I do to master my mental. It's
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it so much, especially when you touch on gratitude and the importance of doing this daily, and all of that together is so powerful and so helpful and valuable. And so many people are going to just really relate to that and really, really love that information. So, Robyn, I feel like I could talk to you literally all day long on this, because these conversations are always so amazing with you, and especially hearing your own personal story, your tips, your tricks for navigating anxiety, managing these experiences are so good. And I cannot wait to feature this. So I just want to thank you once again for, taking the time in your day to come out here on Master Your Mental and share your story with me and with everybody else. It's been so much fun, and you are such an awesome person. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Paris. It was an honor to be here. And if there's anybody that is struggling or just has questions, don't hesitate to just reach out to me. You can easily find me on my website, which is therobyngraham.com, or you can just shoot me an email. I'm always open to, starting dialogue with someone to help them. And my email is robyn@therobyngraham.com.
Yes, you guys heard it from her, and definitely reach out to her and connect with her. She is amazing and such a beautiful soul. And I know you guys definitely got that from this episode today. So, whether you guys are listening during the daytime or the nighttime, I hope that you guys all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your night. And I'm going to end it on that note and say bye to you guys and bye to Robyn. So, bye, Robyn. Thanks for coming out.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.